In this video, I'll be explaining you about a simple Flutter project. Okay, this is how the interface looks like. You'll have a login screen, you'll have a sign up option here. Now, for a new user, you should be able to sign up giving the details. Let us say I'm going to give a username to test123 and password is test123 as well. First name, let's say test, and last name, let's say test. Now, this creates a user account and using followed by the login. So you should be able to log in with the given credentials, test123 and login. So it will take you to a dashboard where you should be able to do the CRUD operations, CRUD, so create, retrieve, update, and delete. Now let's say you want to create a post and the name is title is P1 and the description for P1, and then let's create one more P2 and the description is P2 description. And once you create a post, you can see the list of posts created by that user, and by clicking on one of the posts it takes you to the edit screen where you should be able to update the post. And if you don't want to, if you're looking to delete a post, you can delete the post and finally log out. So, and this is how this project looks like. Let's dig deep into what are the different components of the project and how to implement it. You can find the project at the following GitHub location. It also includes some other Flutter lab exercises. And inside that, you can find a folder called MiniProject. This is where the entire project is placed. So you will see three components inside it. So one of the component is the Flutter front-end app, which is actually implemented using Flutter. So that you can have the single code base for multiple platforms like Android app or iOS app, or you should be able to develop compile it into a desktop application or a web application as such. So one single interface for one single code base for multiple apps is what you get from Flutter, followed by an ExpressJS backend. So this is the application which actually exposes the API for the Flutter frontend, and through the API, whatever the operations are made, they are reflected in the MySQL database. They are persisted in the MySQL database. These are the three main components of the project. One is the user app, the other is the backend application, and MySQL for persistence. So to get started with, you can actually open the readme.md file, which actually tells you how you can set up the project in your local machine. And then there are few prerequisites for this project, and the prerequisites are something like this. You first need to do a MySQL installation in your laptop, and then also you need to install Node.js, and you need to set up the Flutter. So this is something that you can download the Flutter archive from the given location, and then assume that you are working on Windows OS. So once the downloaded archive, let's assume it is placed in C: software, extract the file, and you should see something like this. Somewhere you should find the bin directory inside the Flutter folder. Now this is something that you need to add to the path given you are working in Windows. Okay, so for this you need to edit the system environment, go to the environment variables and select the system variables. Within that, choose the path and click on the edit. Add a new entry to the list of path directories and paste the bin directory. So this may be something which is relevant to your machine. So based on wherever you place the Flutter, you just pick that directory and then paste it under the path. Once you are done, you should be able to open the command prompt and select the Flutter and hyphen version. So this should actually display the Flutter version installed, and then it will also initially when you are running it for the first time, initially you should be it automatically downloads something which is needed for it, and then post that I would recommend you to go and install VS Code as well. So after installing the VS Code, open the mini project folder in the VS Code, and this is how it looks like. Should be see a mini project. Inside that you should see an app with the user app folder and also a backend folder. Now let's assume we want to launch this application first instead of getting into the code. So first thing is open the README file. You should see a high level instructions specified here. Set up the DB and then launching the backend app. Before that, you can see that there is a script given to you, script.sql. This is something that you need to run and set up your database. So after installing MySQL, what you need to do is you should connect with MySQL using any of the clients, or you can directly use the command line option or the command line interface provided by MySQL. Anyway, it is up to you. So once you connect with the database instance, you should run the following commands, like you need to first create a database and then select the database. You need to create a table named user with the following fields. You need to create a post table. Once you are done, you should see something like this. You should see some list of users. So this is some test data which was present earlier. I can remove this. Let me see that. Can remove this option. Now let's say you got two tables without any data details in them, and then you are done with the DB setup. You need to run the script and set up your database. Once done, you are done with the DB setup. Then the next thing you would like to do is to go to the command line somewhere in the folder. Just move to the folder where you placed the mini project, where you will see a folder named backend. So go to the backend folder, and you can see that this is an ExpressJS and Node.js app which actually talks to the database, and it also exposes the API needed for the front end, that is Flutter here. So first time when you download the folder and extract it, you should you should do an npm install of this project, because that is how the dependencies are obtained. So let's say if you look at the package.json, you can clearly see that this project needs the following dependencies which need to be installed in the local machine. So that's why you just need to do npm install. So once done, you should be good to go. So the dependencies are met, and you can use either node followed by app.js. This is also fine. Once you run the application, you can clearly see the server is listening to the port 3000. So the machine on which it is running and followed by the port number. So you have reserved a port named 3000, and you should be able to hit the API and get the response. And for that to happen, you can use some tool like Postman or any other REST interfacing tools you can pick, and try to hit the API endpoint and see if it is working or not. And one of the API endpoint is the user sign up. So user sign up, you should see something like this. You send out a post request to the URL. So maybe in the machine you can actually type the full URL, something like this. local host or the IP address of the machine followed by 3000 and the API path needed to interact with the REST API endpoint. Let us say API users and sign up. This is the endpoint which actually registers the user. You need to send a payload, which is a JSON payload with the following details: username, password, first name, and last name. So you can choose whatever the username you want. And this should be a JSON payload. Here in the drop down, you also need to check the JSON and hit this endpoint. You should see the user registered. And also when you go back to the database and query the users table, you should see a user created in the database. So this is how you can test the applications. Using the Postman, you can actually hit all the endpoints required, needed, all the endpoints available, and you should test your API. So now we have a running backend application. So this is actually the backend part of it. You can also see the Flutter Postman collection and the environment given for you, so which you can import in the Postman and run the API endpoints and see what are all the different endpoints available. And then coming to the Flutter app. So for VS Code to recognize the Flutter project, you go to the extensions tab, you click on the Flutter, select search for the Flutter. This is the extension that you need to install. So for the Flutter to be recognized inside the VS Code. Okay. So once you are done, and maybe you need to restart the VS Code so that the Flutter plugin or extension is loaded properly. So if the Flutter app contains a folder called lib, and inside that there is a file called main dot dot, which is the main file for the Flutter application. And here you can see the run option. So this run option will come to you only when the Flutter extension is properly installed. And before even clicking on the run option, just what you need to do is you do a Control Shift P and select the Flutter device, select the device, and the device need to be selected as Chrome. If you have the emulators running, you can select the emulator as well. But for now, let us pick the Chrome. Click the Chrome. Once you selected the target device and click on the run option, you should see the Flutter app running. And if it is running properly, let us see the username is demo user. So going back to the app, should be able to log in using the demo user and log in, and you should see the dashboard page. So if this works, then your Flutter is connected with your ExpressJS backend. And something important that you need to understand before jumping further, inside the Flutter app, there is a folder called assets. Within assets, there is an element file named .env where you need to place the proper IP address here. So the IP address of your machine. So after setting this, you can launch the app, without which the Flutter won't be able to recognize the backend API endpoint. So you just need to put the proper IP here. That's all. And once you do that, you can go and select the run option over the main function. So now that you have seen how the API and how the Flutter app is interacting with the API and other stuff, let us slightly dig deep and understand some of the important points of this project. I may not be able to explain each and every line of it, but we will be touching upon the important aspects of it. Okay. So the first thing is, let us get into the backend. So your backend project is an ExpressJS app, and here is where it starts. We have something called as app.js, which is the one which actually launches the application and starts listening to the port 3000. and there is something called as db.js, which creates a connection pool with the given database, host, user, database name, and password. And these things are obtained from the environment, and the environment file is .env, and this is where you can actually change those values. So in which DB host the database is running, username, password, and the other stuff. And these things are made available to the db.js through the .env package, so which enables us to read the .env file and import everything which is present there into the process environment so that you can access them. So this is something which enables you to connect with the database. And let's begin with the app.js. So what are the different API endpoints exposed in this project? Is something you need to look at. So when you look at the project, we divide the API into two parts. One is the user API and the other is the post API. User API is the one which is publicly accessible. We don't need any security token and other stuff, because when the user is performing a sign up, he should be able to access the endpoint right away without any credentials, tokens, and other stuff. So there is a sign up endpoint, there is a login endpoint, which is given unrestricted access, public access. And if you look at the second part of the API, which is the post API, so which enables you to create a post, retrieve, update a post, and delete a post. And all these API endpoints require the token, so which is obtained through the login. So once you send out a login request, the user will be given the token which they should persist, and that should be supplied as the authorization header as part of the HTTP request. So the token is actually the JWT token, JWT, JSON Web Token. This is something which enables you to sign, put the data, sign it, and create a hash so that it is not modified, and then encrypt it and other stuff. So you can get into the details of the JWT token if you wish to. So for now, I'm just leaving the part. So all the second part of the API requires the token. So let us see how it is actually implemented. When you go to the app.js, you can clearly see there is something called as CORS, this actually the JSON. These things are what we call as a middleware. Uh, it's a kind of a chain of responsibility design pattern as well. And in Spring Boot Java and Spring Boot world, these are also called as a filters and other kind of stuff. So when a request is obtained, it goes through all these middleware components. And if you look at one example middleware, this is one example middleware which actually passes on the request to the next component in chain. So if there is no call to the next, what that means is the request will be stopped there so that it is not actually forwarded. These are kind of filters. So JSON filter or JSON middleware obtains the raw HTTP request in a binary format and converts that to the JSON format so that it can be processed or consumed easily with uh, by the rest of the components. So that is one of the thing. And we have a second middleware, which is the authentication middleware. Now, if you look at it, so there are two endpoints. We call them as public paths because we don't want to restrict access to these endpoints. So we want to give access to them straight away. So you have two endpoints here, login and sign up. And if the request path is part of the public paths, so we are simply forwarding the request to the target component. We are not authenticating it. But if it is not within this paths, then what we are doing is we are actually sending the request to the auth middleware, so that it can authenticate whether the token is present in the request or not, and only then it can forward it. So let us take a look at what auth middleware is doing. Actually, it's a kind of a function, it's not a middleware. So it's a kind of a function which takes the request response and the next component. So it's a next component in chain. So what it is doing is it actually extracting the authorization header, and if that is not present, immediately sending the response status 401 and with no auth header as the message. And here the request is returned. So there is no call to the next. So that's something that you need to remember. If the authorization header is present, then it is split by space, and then you take the second component. So what this means is normally when you are sending the authorization header, you tend to actually send the bearer token, like something like this. So the bearer keyword and followed by the actual token. This is the authorization header. So we are splitting this into two parts so that this becomes the 0th one, and this becomes the first one. So what this line is doing is actually splitting the token authorization header and takes the first part of it. And now if the token is not present, it's again saying reject the request with 401. If the token is present, then verify whether it is a valid JSON token or not, JWT token or not, using the given secret. And if it is valid, then the decoded whatever the JSON which is available as part of the token, that is the data, so that is attached to the request with the name user. The key is the user and the value is something that is obtained as part of the token. And then the request is forwarded to the next component. So what this means is you are reading the authorization header. If not present, you are rejecting it. And if there is a token part of it, if it is not present, then we are rejecting it. And then we are validating the token. If it is valid, only then we are forwarding the request to the next component in chain, which is ideally the API endpoint. So this is how we are actually filtering the requests through the app.use middleware. So this is something written here. It's actually a very nice feature to have, because whenever you are obtaining a request and actually the API endpoint is reading the request and processing it. So we are actually internally, without the API endpoint, without changing the API endpoint, we are actually adding the middlewares so that we can add any number of pre-processing components, pre and post-processing components in between, so that the API endpoint need not be changed for every change that you are looking to make. And also this segregates, it's actually a separation of concerns, because API endpoints can simply worry about what need to be done and what business logic need to be evaluated, rather than focusing about either whether the request is obtained or validated with proper tokenization. And there are some other use cases like what is the time of arrival of the request, and how much duration it took to process that request, and other aspects. These things can be safely handled here, so that endpoint API endpoint can simply focus on the business logic. This is a very interesting pattern. It's called as a chain of responsibility design pattern, which is rigorously used across the frameworks. So this is something very simple and makes the code very cleaner. And the rest of the things, I think you should be able to understand it on your own, because if the path is actually targeting the API slash users, then the requests are forwarded to the user routes. If it is for API slash posts, actually requests are forwarded to the post routes. Now, when you look at the routes and understand the posts, these are simply nothing but the database DML operations, like you are obtaining a post request and you got the title and description. So you're supposed to create a post with the given title and description. So these things are straightforward. These are a kind of DML operations we are performing. And by the time a request is received here, if you look at this point, request.user, this value is set by the auth. So the auth is going to set whatever is available as part of the token, data as part of the token is set, which is exposed to the components through the user key. So these things are actually using that user key and they're extracting the user ID, which is obtained through the token, and then they're inserting their post on behalf of that user. So this is something that you need to look at. So the first part again is what is the data part of the token, who is setting it? Because you are obtaining the data part and you are setting it to the user, but who is actually setting it? So for that, you need to get to the login component. So let us see the login endpoint and what is the behavior of it. So we are actually querying the user's table with the given username, and if there is no record, we are rejecting that request. If there is a record, then we are trying to compare the password. Ideally, this is not supposed to be the way to be done because this is using decryption and encryption logic, which should be avoided. We should be doing a hash of the password and we should be matching the password against the hash. But that's something that is not in the scope of this project. So we are trying to compare the passwords. If it's not a match, we are rejecting that. And if it is a match, then what we are doing is we are actually creating or signing the data. And this is what is the data. So which is nothing but the user ID and the username. This is kept as part of the data. And we are signing the request, which is actually a JWT token. We are signing it using the secret mentioned in the environment, and the token expires after 1 hour. And this token is written as part of the response to the login request. So keep that in mind. So this token includes the data, and the data contains user ID and username. So you hit the login endpoint URL, you get the user ID and username, and you get the token back and the response from the for the login. You get the token and you submit the token to the rest of the endpoints like posts. From the token, the auth filter is actually going to decode and expose that data as a user key, and this is something which is consumed by the API endpoints to extract which user uh, the request belongs to. So at a high level, if you want to summarize these aspects, the concept is simple. All the requests are intercepted before they are actually submitted to the API endpoint. And during the process, we are trying to intercept all the requests and see if the request is matching with any of the public URLs. If it is the case, then we are simply forwarding the request. And if it is not, we are trying to see if we can authenticate the request in a proper way. And during the process of the authentication, we are looking for the authorization header, which comes as part of the HTTP request. And then if it is not, then we are rejecting it. If it is yes, if it is present, then we're trying to get the token, validate the token, and if it is valid, we are actually getting the user ID and username as part of the verified token, so which we have created during the login process, and attaching it to the request as part of the process so that this user key is accessed by the subsequent API endpoints. Whatever the components which are part of the chain, they will be able to read the user from the user key, and then obtain the user ID for attaching it as a reference during the creation, updation, and deletion process. And then you have the REST API endpoints, which simply does the DML operations. So this is something that you need to understand at a high level, and this is all about the backend part of it.